The Paldea region is home to some of the most strange and interesting Pokemon we have discovered, but two have always stood out to me as particularly strange. Dondozo and Tatsugiri are a pair of fish that engage in a really unique symbiotic relationship, which I'll use as an excuse to yap and yope about real-life ecological phenomenon. So strap in, get swallowed, command your big fish friend, because it's time to dive into Dondozo. Wait, let me reword that. Let's talk about Dondozo in isolation first, as it's the more straightforward of the two Pokemon. It's a big fish. That's sort of it? Well, not really, but its lifestyle isn't particularly unique or special. It's a predatory fish that serves as one of its environment's apex predators. Their main defense is that, by getting bigger, they become much harder to predate. This is a similar strategy that Pokemon like Wailord and their real-life equivalent, the blue whale, uses. But there is a problem with this lifestyle. Dondozo aren't filter feeders, so the bigger they get, the slower they get, allowing their prey to escape more easily. This puts an upper limit on their size, and with other water Pokemon also getting quite big and powerful, such as Gyarados, it's not impossible for them to be another fish's meal. Now let's talk about Tatsugiri in isolation. They are a small dragon water type that, to us humans, superficially resembles plated sushi. In reality, this is a coincidence, instead simply having evolved a color pattern that one of their preferred prey species find enticing. These usually consist of bird Pokemon such as Pidgeotto and semi-aquatic Pokemon like Quagsire that will try to snag up what they see as their favorite meal, before Tatsugiri, with its surprisingly immense power for a Pokemon of its size, strikes. As they are incredibly cunning Pokemon, Tatsugiri also complement this mimicry with behavior, which is where the name of their forms comes from. They'll droop, curl, or stretch to more consistently attract the right prey. However, this survival strategy also comes with immense risk. Playing the part of food can often mean that you actually do become said food. Tatsugiri is thus very skittish, and knows when to escape a fight it can't win. But when a strong and fast Pokemon sees Tatsugiri as a favorite snack, it may not be able to react fast enough. Adapting to this ecological niche requires something not often talked about in Pokemon, and it's often misunderstood in real life as well: evolution and R/K selection. A quick sidebar, I'll be talking about evolution a lot from now on, but remember that I mean Darwinian evolution, not the more metamorphosis Pokemon style of evolution. Okay, let's start with evolution. People often understand the basics, that beneficial traits are selected for, and thus organisms change over time to have more favorable traits for their environment and niche within that environment. However, often this is shown as a major trait evolving because it would be beneficial. Let's take the idea that fish evolved to live on land because there was less competition there. That's true in a broad sense, but evolution isn't goal-oriented like that. The only real rule of evolution is,
you can't if you're dead.
Thus, every single mutation that becomes widespread did so by ensuring you have more kids than others of your species. This means instead of fish going on land, it's simply that those who were able to survive outside the water for a tiny bit longer were able to survive more often, have more kids, and eventually the ones with the most kids were those who were able to stay outside of water the longest. I promise this is relevant to Pokemon, just stay with me on this. So evolution works fastest if you have a lot of kids and a lot of them die. This way, many genetic mutations can happen and immediately be weeded out if they aren't beneficial. More evolution can happen more quickly. This is why the hardiest organisms tend to be small and have many offspring at once. It wasn't the sauropods that survived the KPG extinction, it was the small generalist mammals and avian dinosaurs. Of course, big organisms with little offspring still happen. This is the R/K selection I was talking about. R selection is the strategy of having tons of offspring that you invest very little into, causing most of them to die, and K selection is having very few offspring that you invest a lot of energy into. Larger organisms tend to be K-selective as they occupy more stable niches and don't benefit as much from fast changes to the gene pool. This is a vast oversimplification, but I hope it's enough to get the point across. I very much encourage you look more into it because it's really fascinating. Okay, back into Pokemon. We can make the assumption here that Dondozo are K-selective and Tatsugiri are R-selective. Of course, Pokemon eggs are a mystery, but we do see Mega Tatsugiri using attacks that consist of roe, so it can probably reproduce via those types of eggs as well, and their larval stage probably sit at the very bottom of the food chain, with most of them dying early. It'd also explain why they're able to mimic so many different forms of preferred food for their prey, as they can quickly adapt due to having so much offspring. The ones of which who attract either too strong or too few Pokemon simply won't get to reproduce due to being eaten or starving. I'll finally talk about the symbiotic relationship between Dondozo and Tatsugiri now. Let's say a Dondozo is born that is slightly larger than the rest. It'll have a slightly harder time being able to get food, as Dondozo are relatively dull and slow, so while it can survive, it'll have less of a chance to do so. And for this larger size to spread throughout the population, it'd need to have 2 or 3 litters of offspring, as with their higher effort put into reproduction, the changes will only spread slowly. But Tatsugiri could go through multiple generations of natural selection while this one Dondozo is still alive. If just one of those Tatsugiri has a mutation, or simply an instinct, or an idea, to commit to its bait role more while the Dondozo is around, and the Dondozo snags the Pokemon that went for Tatsugiri and shares that catch with it, you now have a beneficial relationship between 2 Pokemon. The Dondozo, while dull, will still learn to lie and wait, becoming more of an ambush predator, while the Tatsugiri can attract the larger and more dangerous Pokemon it'd normally avoid, safe in the knowledge that it has backup. Both of these Pokemon have now fixed one of the major weaknesses of their survival strategy, and are thus able to live longer, have more offspring, passing those traits down and spreading them throughout the population. And there's even more to this. The third major biological concept I wanted to talk about: intraspecific competition. This is when members of the same species compete amongst one another for a limited resource, most often access to mates, or territory, or food. This is very common, as it's another way for animals to select for beneficial traits. Stronger males, more territorial behaviors when the resources are scarce, etc. As the population density between Tatsugiri and Dondozo is pretty vastly different, a need arises for Tatsugiri to somehow decide who gets to partner with a specific Dondozo. So Tatsugiri will compete with one another, using their inflatable throat sacs to try and intimidate each other, or full-on battling for the right to become a Dondozo's partner. This type of behavior further puts evolutionary pressure on Tatsugiri to become more suitable commanders when allied with a Dondozo, which is when the signature ability likely arose. However, all the Tatsugiri who don't make the cut still try to survive without a Dondozo to partner with, causing the traits present in solitary Tatsugiri to not disappear, and even allowing for a Tatsugiri to have its Dondozo stolen by a more powerful Tatsugiri that may challenge it. This then puts evolutionary pressure on Tatsugiri to become more cunning and smart as well. And I could keep talking about all the little ways behaviors could arise from these different environmental pressures, but I'll cut it off here. Really, this was all a big excuse for me to yap about Darwinian evolution in more detail, as I feel like it's often misunderstood by people who learn the simple school definition and then never look more into it. I used to be one of those people as well, and gaining a deeper understanding of it made me really appreciate the natural world and even my own weird human traits. I hope you learned something and enjoyed this longer form video of mine. If you did, be sure to leave a like and hit that sub button to see any future videos I make, as well as my streams. I do realize a lot of people who enjoy the ecology stuff might not be as interested in watching me power wash or something, but don't worry, I always make sure that my streams have a unique thumbnail, so you shouldn't get them confused in their sub box at all. Hope you have a good rest of your day, and remember to clean the tops of your shelves as well. Dust gets there and it'll make your throat dry if you never clean it.